I'll invite Chet to introduce herself.
Thank you, Ashif. Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here today. I am located in Calgary. A shout out to all the Calgary peeps on the line. I am currently the Associate Vice President of Strategy Operations and Social Economics for ATB Financial. And so really excited for the conversation today and looking forward to hearing some great questions and comments from you all.
Thank you, Chet. I'll pass it over to Chief McPhee.
Yeah, thanks, Ashif, and thanks, Chet, as well. Dale McPhee, I'm the Chief of Police in Edmonton, certainly since February 2019. Prior to that, I was a Deputy Minister in the Government of Saskatchewan, had the Corrections and Policing portfolio, but I also had the Senior Deputy role at Transformational Change, which is something I think every government and everybody talks about, yet I'm not sure everybody understands it. So prior to that, I was a police chief in Prince Albert, and I'm also an entrepreneur. Used to be a member of Entrepreneurs organization for several years. This particular space is pretty exciting because something I've been pretty fortunate to probably travel across the world speaking on. And I think this venture that we're going to talk about with you today and putting some of the like-minded thinking that many people have on the call, I think we have the ability to change the game and get some better outcomes for a lot of people in need of it. So very much look forward to the dialogue today.
Thank you, Dale. With that, let's kick it off. I'm going to start with a very quick presentation, about maybe 5 minutes, and we'll talk about the Community Safety and Wellness Accelerator and really explain our why and what it's about. And then we'll kind of go into, Chet will explain their why and ATB's why into why they have supported this and what they're hoping to get out of it, and same with EPS. So with that, I'm going to present presentation here. Okay, perfect. If you're not seeing the screen, let me know. Yeah, okay, good, excellent. Now I need to learn how to move this forward too. Let's talk about our why. In Edmonton alone, there's $7.5 billion spent on community and social programs. And there's been some good outcomes. Can we do better? We believe we can do better. And so, what's missing? In our opinion, if we bring in entrepreneurship, bring in technology, data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, et cetera, we believe we can make a significant difference. And so that's really our why. This is our chance to do good, to deliver better outcomes, and to create scalable companies, and for Alberta to lead the world in community safety and wellness. We're known worldwide for our energy, which is great. What we would like to do is also be known for delivering solutions that have a social impact. So what are some ideas around community safety and wellness? So, predicting domestic violence earlier, so early intervention, solving cold cases, and so on. I'm not going to read all the items, but you get the gist. There is a number of things that we can do to really have a great social impact. A gamified platform to provide racial bias awareness. There might be certain things that we're doing or saying, et cetera, and we're unaware that we actually have a racial bias. So platforms like that could help us and help us get better. There's things around providing proactive mental health and wellness. Again, different apps that, look at your behavior, look at what you're doing in a day, and help you through that. So just things like that. These are all ideas for social impact ventures, and that's what we're looking for within the accelerator. In terms of an overview, so when we look at how we help and surround ourselves with the ecosystem, we're going to bring in ventures, entrepreneurs from Alberta and beyond. Quite frankly, there might be a really good solution that's in wherever in Turkey or in the Netherlands that helps with domestic violence. We're going to encourage them to come here, to come to Alberta, work with our agencies, work with our data, build out a solution, and then help we'll help them kind of go through the accelerator program, understand, from a customer discovery standpoint, value prop, price point, et cetera, but really help them scale that so that they can bring that to the rest of the world. So again, creating solutions that are very scalable. We're going to work with mentors. We're going to have also a seed fund that we've launched, and it's a social impact fund. We've already got a lead investor for that. And so the intent behind that is the companies that go through the cohort, they will be eligible for seeking that funding, and which is an investment really. And then on the on the flip side, we're going to help these companies once they've gone through our accelerator. Maybe they need to go through a scale-up accelerator. So again, the great news is we have some amazing new accelerators that have just been brought thanks to Alberta Innovates into Alberta. So we're looking to tap into the entire ecosystem. And just on the final slide here, these are just some of the things, you'd ask, why will a company from the Netherlands come here? Well, we have the key ingredients that an entrepreneur needs to be successful. We're going to have, very specific data that you cannot buy, you cannot get. We're going to have that. We're going to have the community agencies that are going to be your first pilot and your first paying customers. Again, as a startup, always when I start a new business, I'd love to get my first customer. We're going to help you get that here. We're going to have, funding. We're going to have mentors from all around the world with domain expertise. And then we have that structured 12-week process from Alchemist. Again, if you're not familiar, Alchemist is a leading accelerator, actually ranked #1 in the world out of the Bay Area. And they have come here because they really want to do this and do this social good. And then we have the entire ecosystem integration. So this is just a quick slide on the timelines, the 12-week basically plan, a lot of customer discovery, et cetera. Great program, great ecosystem. So we're really looking forward to working with everyone on this. So with that, maybe I will pass it over to Chet. Chet, maybe talk about your why and ATB's why in supporting this.
Absolutely. So like I mentioned, I oversee the social economic strategy as part of my portfolio, and we call it Greater Good. And our why is to uplift the well-being of Albertans by solving societal problems. And so one of the big questions for us when we started this strategy was, how can we identify the biggest social problems in Alberta that, if solved, would equate to the largest economic long-term outcomes? And so we had the opportunity to partner with an organization called the Social Progress Imperative. And we've leveraged their data methodology to build out 35 indices across Alberta so that we can now zoom in and see specifically what are the biggest problems in each area. And so I'm really, really excited about this program that we're bringing to Alberta with the Alchemist, because we're going to be connecting the index to the accelerator so that we can help focus innovation and technology on the biggest social problems that are prevalent in our communities, as well as have a way to measure the long-term impact and success. So really, really excited about what we're doing here.
Excellent. Thank you, Chet. Dale, I'll turn it over to you. Your why and EPS's why.
Yeah, and it's good because she said my why and EPS's why, because there's a personal why and there's an organizational why, and it's actually part of the reason that I came to the city of Edmonton. So I think this particular piece has been missed for quite some time. When Ashif mentioned $7.5 billion in the city of Edmonton, that's annually. That's not one-time spend. That's every year for a long time. So if you think of that over a period of time and you ask, are we getting the outcomes that we probably need? No, in particular, if you look at, we got a high crime rate and we got high social issues. And a lot of cities are seeing that, and they've been compounded by COVID. But for me, it all focuses on that ecosystem for change. And having looked at this, as I mentioned earlier, across internationally, is we're jumping to solutions and we don't necessarily have the question right. I mean, if you just think about that and put it in a practical context, what could that mean to Edmonton? And I'm not saying the things we're doing are bad, and that's what Ashif said, and what Chet is saying as well. but can we do better, and can we do things differently? Because everything that was built in a time where data really didn't exist to the level it does now. But yeah, we've never changed our approach. We just keep building the same stuff, thinking if we do more of the same, it'll change. I'll give you an example. If we think that we're, for those of you from Edmonton, and looking at our downtown and the social issues downtown, but social issues are everywhere, so our downtown is similar to others. If you ask the question, if you give everybody a house, does that solve anything? Well, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's just going to push it indoors. There's a lot of an addiction problem here. If the answer is solely safe supply and give everybody drugs, if you think about that, do you treat a drug problem with the sole purpose of just giving people more drugs? No, they're all part of the ecosystem, but the ecosystem actually needs a continuum of services that there's no wrong door to get people. And actually what you end up be doing is turning, sometimes in some different words, tax users into taxpayers, but really what that means is give people the opportunity to succeed. And having been across the country as the federal provincial territorial deputy co-chair, 80 to 89% of all our provincial budgets are spent in 8 or 6 ministries, and that's pretty much across the board, and they're all the human service ministries. So for what that means in policing now, back to the organization, we're picking up and continuing to run to these calls for service that we can't solve. But the reality is, if we got the question right and we use the approach differently, most of them are solvable from the fact of getting 20% out of the system. And that's a starting point. 20% of the system in Edmonton is about $1.5 billion. So here's a chance that we can rethink of it. So if you think of what we did in mining, as Ashif mentioned, what we did in oil and gas, what we've done in agriculture, what we've done in tech, we've turned it out to the brightest minds there. We've used innovation to bring outcomes, and that's into the space to become more efficient. If you think of that from an economy perspective, it makes a lot of sense. But when you actually grow the economy, what we're actually doing is we're spending probably right now at 7 times the rate the economy is growing. We need that same innovation on this side. And that's why we need this public-private approach to actually look at things differently and bring a bunch of better outcomes. The light bulb came on for me, and this is where I'll end because I know we got lots to talk about, is when I was in Chicago about 6 years ago, I think it was, maybe 5, there was $500 billion in the room. And there was 53 countries. And it had the MacArthur Foundation, the Gates Foundation, all the big foundations were there too. And they are all struggling to get better social outcomes. But nobody was actually figured out what it is that we're trying to fix. We were all jumping to solutions. We were pouring money at things. We were actually keep making it worse because we're so siloed and we've never looked at it differently. This allows us to look a lot differently, a lot quicker, and allows us to pick the things that are being designed and developed that'll make our cities and our communities safer and better places to live, work, and play.
Thank you, Chief. Totally agree with everything Chet and you have said. The key for me is when I look at the problems that we have, what we've done in the past, et cetera, and then take artificial intelligence and machine learning. What we know about AI and ML is the more data you throw at it, the more data from different sources that you throw at it. So whether it's different ministries, different agencies, et cetera, the better the outcomes and the better the results you get. Your models can be trained, et cetera. So I think what the opportunity we have here is we're going to have files around domestic violence, addictions, mental health, homelessness, et cetera. Bringing all those data sets along with industry data, along with what has been done, et cetera, and then letting loose entrepreneurs and letting loose AI, ML specialists. I think we have an amazing chance to do something very different and something that actually works with great results. So that's what this accelerator is about. I've always believed in that, and I know I can speak from my operational experience. When I would try and solve problems, or when my team would try and solve problems in our own company, we would get to level X. When we brought in somebody from outside that had no idea about our business and our industry, we were always surprised because they would see things that we never would have seen. And that's what we're hoping with this. Let's jump into we have some moderated questions. So, Chet, I'll ask you the first one. Why is this unique, and what should we be concerned about, and what should we be optimistic about?
Why is this unique? I think it's not necessarily super unique when we look across the world, but I would say when we look at the startup ecosystem in Alberta, it would be really unique in the sense where this is the first time where we're bringing a tried and true accelerator program that has seen enormous success worldwide to Alberta. Like we do have some accelerator programs, but a lot of them have been created here. So what I'm excited about and what I think is unique about this is the Alchemist with the tried and true program coming here to really accelerate some of the startup efforts that we're seeing. And it's connected globally, to networks around the world. And so I think that that's a really unique opportunity for entrepreneurs in Alberta to get access to that network, because as we all know, whoever has worked in the entrepreneurship world before, connections really do matter. And so really excited about that. In terms of what I think we should be concerned about, we talk a lot at ATB about the pandemic and heading towards a K-shaped recovery. And so when we say K-shaped recovery, what we mean is the top part of the K are knowledge workers and people who are actually not going to be harmed at all from the pandemic and are actually becoming even more wealthy because of the pandemic. And then the bottom part of the K are service workers, blue collar workers, people who maybe have been struggling before the pandemic and are going to be hurting even more now. And what's troubling about that is the disparity in income between those two groups. And we know from a social economic perspective that when that disparity continues to grow between the rich and the poor, if you will, more social issues arise in society, whether it's abuse, suicide, drug use. There's lots of psychology around that. And so I think as a society, that's what I'm most concerned about right now. And then on the flip side connects to why I'm really genuinely excited about this Alchemist program, as well as the SPI index that we've created so that we can focus on the biggest social pressing problems and hopefully help to reduce that K-shape over time so that we can mitigate any of those societal impacts that may occur with such a large disparity in income between those two groups.
Thank you, Chet. And for those that don't know the SBI, what it's about, I'd encourage you to look at that. At the end, I'll put a link to our website where you'll find all these links as well. But what I'm really excited about is the Social Progress Imperative Index is something where, in Edmonton, as an example, again, thanks to ATB for doing all the work, you can go by region. You can go into Edmonton South and you can look at things like literacy levels and look at the rating. Overall, Alberta, I believe, is at 49 out of 100. Okay, 100. So we're below 50. I think ATB, your goal is to get it to 60 by 2030, right? And I believe this accelerator can help that. What I really like about this is that we talk about social impact and we talk about the good that we're doing, et cetera. And I always get the question, well, how are you measuring it? How do you actually know you're doing good, right? And so there's a lot of anecdotal things. Now, we've helped here, et cetera. But now we can actually point to it and go, well, we brought, literacy levels from, and I'm just making up numbers here, but from 48 to 95, in 10 years. That's measurable, right? So that's what I like about this. And we're going to tie all of the initiatives to that. Dale, let's talk about EPS and let's talk about, how will EPS be a part of this and what's the relevance of EPS with this initiative?
Yeah, just to kind of pick up on what Chet says, we've been a police service that's been a busy police service for many, many years, and crime rate here has been way too high for the size of a city. It's like any city, we have big problems, but the approach has always been the same. Get to the calls quickly, put them into the justice system, go to the same person tomorrow, and it just continues the hamster in the wheel. Give you an example of how this, when we started to go down this path and change, and some of you'll be aware of this, certainly as Chief and Chet are, because we were all part of it. We had 9,600 liquor store thefts and robberies in 1 year, 9,600. So we actually started looking at that. And there's a little humor to this story, because the straw that broke the camel's back was a time where we picked an individual up who was charged with 35 of them. And the 35 of them got out the next day at court, and on one condition: don't go to the liquor store. So I phoned the judge up, because I actually knew, and I said, do you not maybe think we might have thought of that? You know, a little bit of humor. But the whole point of this is, when you actually drove or looked into it through data, what was driving that, there was two components. One was the individuals that were supporting their habit, which is our vulnerable population, and one was the organized crime component, which was a legitimate business. So they came with a couple solutions, and it went out to the world, and McEwen actually showed it to McEwen. They won this. And it was a strategy that involved two things. One was a media campaign and an awareness campaign, which was great. On the organized component, they also put in the GPS tracking device, so we could actually track that. And we've had a couple successful cases with that. And then the third piece of this was to put the patron scan and the deterrence in every liquor store. So that's where you go to the bar, you scan your ID to get in. And then the fourth piece of this, the people that were actually vulnerable, we put our help team to connect them to services to get them the services they need, so they didn't have to steal. The ones that have all of that, there's 5 liquor stores, they're down 96%. If we put that in all of our liquor stores, the return on that investment would be, it's mind-boggling how much money that actually is. And that's one project. It's just because we approached it differently. If we approach many of these things differently and focus on the individuals involved, understand the data, what's driving it, we can actually change the pattern with predictability. And we've got a few others ongoing in this space right now. That's why we're involved, because you just can't keep adding resources and people and infrastructure to say that that's going to solve it. It's the approach, and this allows us to change some of the approaches. So it's pretty exciting for us.
Thank you, Dale. And I see there's a couple of questions around the liquor store theft. It was actually, so we'd done a global challenge. There were 240, if I'm not mistaken, applicants from all around the world, including folks from universities like Stanford and MIT, et cetera, et cetera. We had an independent judging panel, and the solution that was picked actually came right from our own backyard, from McEwen Social Institute. And they are the ones that came up with this idea of, I think it was called bait and snitch. Okay, bait and snitch. Bait was the RFID tag in specific liquor bottles, and snitch was a call, like basically a Crime Stoppers line, where, what we did know is that it would be some, very few bars and restaurants that would buy these bootleg liquor, right? And if you buy liquor legitimately, the delivery comes during weekdays, during normal business hours. If you're buying it illegally, it usually comes on a Friday or Saturday past midnight. And so if you're working in one of those establishments and you see that, you could call into this line. You'd get a reward, obviously. It would be all anonymous, but it would also then help, complete the life cycle in terms of finding the people that are actually buying this stuff, to all the way to who is organizing these crime rings. So it's worked really well. And again, to the chief's point, we thought of that problem very differently, asked different questions. So that's the goal behind this. Chet, let's move back to you again in terms of what does success look like to you for this? How will you say, and how will ATB say this initiative was successful?
So you touched on this a little bit, Ashish. So from an index perspective, we would love to see that the index move from 49 to 60 by 2030. And we see the accelerator a big part of making that happen. I think outside of data, like what we would also really love to see is the Alchemist become a platform for accelerating the next big unicorn in Alberta, and that being from an Alberta entrepreneur. We have so much talent here, and I think that this accelerator, is going to be a big part of creating the next big success story. So we're really keen to help make that happen. Absolutely.
I like that. And maybe not just one unicorn, but many unicorns.
I like that even more.
We have the ability, we have the talent, we have
Absolutely.
everything we need. So there's no reason. Dale, I'll ask you the same question. What will success look like to you for this?
It's a great question, and it's kind of leading up to get to Chet's point. I think that's critical for us is success. So there's only two things that really matter in this space if you're going to have success: is reducing intake and making sure every off ramp works. What's an off ramp? Mental health, addictions, housing, homeless, bail remand. The list goes on, right? So police control 100% of intake in the justice system. Prosecutors and judges don't exist if we don't lay a charge. I mean, that's just saying that's never going to happen, but that's reality. The same thing in the hospitals. If we do a better job in public health, they don't end up in the hospital, and the wait times and everything else go down. This, I think, will start just like the liquor stores, help to reduce intake, so disproportionately getting people out of the justice system. And then this will also help changing how we measure off ramps. So right now, an off ramp in government is how many people you take in, how many people you put in housing, how many people you put in, or homeless that you put in, how many people that you take on child welfare, bail remand. But nobody actually measures how many people we get out and get them to independence. And if we start to measure that and invest in that and change the way we operate in that space, you get to exactly what Chet is talking about. You get to a way better community that's a lot safer. It's certainly got more opportunity, because let's face it, everybody looks at a city's downtown, and if it's not good, it detracts investment, because that's where most cities have disproportionately the number of their retail, which is disproportionate number of their tax base. But it happens to be all across the city. So for us, it's hitting both of those things at the same time to create exactly what Chet is. And for us, and I mean, my job ultimately is to work myself out of a job. I think I got a ways to go, but the reality is that's success.
Excellent. And you both touched on the point of, what we're all calling a livable city, right? At the end of the day, we want our grads that graduate, from NAIT, McEwen, U of A, et cetera, and Calgary, obviously, we want them to stay here. We want them to flourish here. Right. And we're seeing in my opinion, not a good trend right now about them leaving. Right. And for different reasons. I know of one, a personal story, a really wealthy entity from New York came to Edmonton to invest a sizable amount of money into new buildings here. And everything was going well. However, during one fine evening, the person wanted to go for a walk. And he went for a walk downtown, and he came back a few minutes later, and the decision was, no, we're not investing here. Again, to your point, Dale, we need to make sure our cities are livable. We need to make sure they're safe. We can have the best healthcare, best education, best arts, best everything. But if you don't feel safe walking outside, you're probably not going to want to live here, right? And so it is, it's really important. So I'm glad we're doing this. Let's talk about AI and ML. I mean, that's really, one of the key ingredients that we feel this accelerator has. And I see there's a question, Colin. Does every solution need to have AI ML? The answer is no. When going through the accelerator, you don't need to have that. It is strongly encouraged, obviously, and it is something that will definitely help the ventures going through it, because I believe pretty much everything has a need and use for artificial intelligence and machine learning. It just gets better, right? So we'll help them with that, but you don't need to have that coming in. And we have Amy as a partner within our ecosystem, and as you know, they're a great organization that has incredible domain expertise and talent. We're really fortunate to have them right here. So we're going to have them helping, and there's a number of companies that do artificial intelligence and machine learning consulting, solution providing, et cetera, in Alberta. So we're going to be tapping on them too. I'll go to the last question here, the moderated question, and then we'll go to the audience. So for Chet, how does artificial intelligence and machine learning play a role in this, in your opinion?
You touched on this too, Ashifa, a bit earlier, but one of the reasons why I believe, we still have a lot of societal problems is because we haven't been leveraging the new technology at our disposal to solve some of them. And so when we look across Alberta as a whole, we know that there is about 40,000 nonprofits and charities. We know that there's about 9 billion that is filtered to them every single year. And yet it's really hard to measure and understand the collective impact that we're having. And so I believe that leveraging newer technology is going to help us get smarter, better, and more efficient at solving some of these problems. And I think the liquor store theft is a great example of how that can be done, as well as continuing to build out how we measure our collective impact by leveraging AI and machine learning to help more quickly and fastly help us decipher whether or not the solutions that we're deploying are actually making the impact that we imagine that it would impact. So both on the solving side as well as the measuring side. And I think by doing so, we'll be able to create a measurement system that is as fast and as quick as measuring our collective GDP, so that business leaders and governments going forward can look at both our GDP and SPI score, if you will, to understand the holistic health of our communities going forward.
Excellent. Thank you. Dale, I'll ask you the same question and also ask you to touch on how agencies, organizations like Boyle and Bissell and many of the other agencies can be a part of this.
Yeah, I'll build out with some examples of what Chad is talking about, because I think she nailed that on the solving and the measurement. So I believe AI very much complements subject matter expertise, and I'll give you an example of that. It doesn't necessarily replace it, it enhances it and actually gets it. So historical homicides, historical cases, we have lots of them, and most every city does, and most police services. And we keep cycling people through to look through them to make sure that you actually think you might get another lead to follow up, because at the end of that, there's generally a family member that hasn't got the answers they need, haven't got that satisfaction of peace of mind that every stone has been unturned. We're working with the university right now, the U of A, and can we actually put that through an AI process or machine learning process? And just think how many leads we'll get through that. Guaranteed we're going to get a lot of things that the human eye has missed. And that's just an example. On the other side, on the preventive side, flip side, to how do you get communities involved and partners involved? We're also working on one with two of our third-party not-for-profits, Boyle Street and Bissell, on designing what is it that our vulnerable homeless population actually needs. A co-design home-based project with them, with one of the major folks involved in this. And what we are actually finding out is most of them, they don't say a home. They've got a lot of personal needs that need to be met up front, that a lot of it is in the technical space that is actually very much doable, keeping track of their ID, keeping track of a lot of things that they need to access services. All of these problems that we keep sending them place to place to place to place to get, those are actually fairly easy solutions when we put the right people to start looking at them. So back to what we talked about initially, reduce the intake and make sure the off-ramp works. I think this space puts us on a bit of an accelerated path to do that. And so I think there's some real big opportunities. I can't even imagine all the bright minds that we have in Alberta, and certainly probably lots of them on the call here today. But for us, we've been hiring talent. I have more talent at the Edmonton Police Service than I had in all the government of Saskatchewan. We got economists, mathematicians, doctorates in data modeling, public health data, because to know better is to do better. And if it's predictable, it's generally preventable, but we haven't invested in that space to actually take it out of the system. So I think sky's the limit of what can be accomplished in this space.
Thank you, Dale. To your point on that Project Home Base for the homeless, and the group that's working with us has come up with some prototypes, but I've seen the first prototype, and it's a simple app on your phone, and it's big buttons that say I'm hungry. Okay, so the homeless person can select that, and they will be matched with nearby restaurants, etc., that are willing to donate their food or things like that. Or today, I want to work. I feel healthy today. I want to work. Well, guess what? You'll get a job within a few minutes. There'll be some temp labor, et cetera, facility. So things like that that are available, and that empowers them. That's what they want. They want to be part of the economy. They want to feel like they're contributing, right? And so it's not just a house that they need. That's one of the things they need. They need a lot of different things. And so solutions like that can help. Let's now go to questions from the audience. I see there's a few in the chat. So, we have a small enough group where if you feel comfortable, you want to unmute yourself and ask the question, please do so, or put it in the chat. And I'll maybe start with the last one that I see from John. John, if you want to come on and ask the question, that'd be great. If you're speaking, John, we can't hear you. Okay, I'll ask the question for John. So what can the average citizen do to support our AI excellence, and how can we help achieve a safer city? I'll maybe start, and I'll ask then Chat and Dale to chime in. In terms of what they can do, again, we've got a lot of bright minds, and sometimes I find pairing and partnering is the right strategy. So if you can put together a team and you're passionate about a given problem statement, something that you're either touched with or very a cause that's near and dear to you, looking at a solution in that area would be really good. And again, partner with the right people to bring you that collective experience. Going through this accelerator, it's free, it's easy, and you get all the support. If you've never run a business before, never scaled a business before, this accelerator will help you with that, right? It'll go through the whole programming and then ultimately bring you the right mentorship, the right guidance, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be my suggestion. Chet, any other things to add on that?
Not much to add, but we're really heavy on like technology on this discussion, because we all believe that is part of the future of solving these problems, but it's not the only way to contribute and help. Rolling up your sleeves, volunteering for nonprofits, advocating for the future of certain societal problems that you're passionate about. You can go to ATB Greater Good and you can look at the indices that we've created and find problems that you're passionate about and look for ways to volunteer and advocate for them. There's so much that you can do as an individual citizen that is beyond technology and innovation. So never underestimate your own ability to make an impact. And I talk to my team about this a lot. Like for us as humans, like I think that we've developed a bit of inertia in our systems, because we see all of these problems around us all the time that is almost kind of like numbing to us. And so one of the examples that I used is a few weeks ago, I was riding my bike, and if you're familiar with Calgary, you would know the Peace Bridge that we have. And there was a homeless person who was passed out in the middle of the bridge and to me appeared to be unconscious. And I was so perplexed by this, because while I was biking up, it looked like a pile of garbage in the middle of the bridge, and people were just walking by. So I'm like, oh, this must just be garbage. Like, so weird to see like a garbage bag in the middle of the bridge. As I got closer, I realized that it was like a human that was completely overdosed. And so I immediately called 911. We got the ambulance there, and like I hope that she's okay. And so I share that story because what was really startling to me was just seeing how many people were used to seeing that, so much so that they didn't take action. And like that woman is someone's sister, someone's potential, like that could be someone's mother, right? And so we can't lose that human empathy. We can't lose that desire to want to make change, regardless of what the opportunity is in front of us.
Thank you for sharing that, Chet, and thank you for calling 911. Dale, anything to add on that?
Yeah, you know what? I think John has always been a pretty practical guy. I think it's just keep it simple. I think it's the art of the possible. And I'll just give you an example. Some of the training I took when I was much younger was at the Edward Lowe Foundation. And those of you who don't know who Edward Lowe is, he's the guy that invented kitty litter. And we went to a place in Cassopolis, Michigan, and leadership of me, leadership of people, leadership of organization, 3 modules. But it was all about the art of the possible. And his whole thing is if you develop the art of the possible, these secondary businesses, as we're talking about here, the small businesses will support the economy in a time of downturn will actually prop the economy up and create success. We're in a period of time right now. And I think really it's just to entertain the discussions. It's about a consortium of that are willing to look at different things and stop doing 100% of exactly what we're doing. It doesn't mean that we throw the baby out with the bathwater. As I've always said, I used to own A&Ws. You don't mess with the team burger, the root beer, and the onion rings, but everything else you can have a look at. And the reality is right now we're not exercising this to the fullest. And I think that starts with conversations like this. Talk about it. It's not as scary as people think it is. Matter of fact, every one of us are probably being followed by Google and Apple and everybody else now, and we all know that. But you know what? It's time to use some of this stuff for good. I equate this to like if you're in rural in Alberta and it's night and you're driving down the road and you don't have your headlights on, would you turn them on for safety purposes? Using this data differently is a chance to turn the headlights and get some people some solutions. And it starts with a conversation.
Thank you, Dale. Well put. I see Luke has a question. So Luke, I'll call you to ask that question.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I work with Startup Edmonton. It's great to see you all. Fantastic session so far. But I also have a non-for-profit on the side. Very applicable to this conversation. It uses AI to connect people to social services, kind of personalize this recommendations for them. And then it uses the data kind of collected from those personas that people use to get connected to support the service providers and agencies to kind of have the data to make informed decisions, understand the market trends, predict future needs, things like that. I just got off a conversation this morning with a pitch with the Canadian Mental Health Association, who also runs 211, and they had suggested basically that this has been tried to be done by government and not-for-profit organizations time and time again with a little success. And so Gary from the CMHA suggested that perhaps the future for this and the success would depend off of a community joint venture with 5 key different organizations, basically sitting on a board, helping direct kind of the not-for-profit in its efforts to do this work and then get buy-in that way. So from all of your different backgrounds, and obviously I have seen the Accelerator. I do plan to explore it, by the way. I'm very interested. I'd be curious in your thoughts, like A, on the idea, and B, on that sort of joint venture from these different organization approaches. As a not-for-profit, like I'm not obviously worried about ownership because there's no money involved, but I do have the minor concern about like a future where you get a few key groups controlling the entire kind of future infrastructure and recommendation system for the province and eventually other provinces as well. So yeah, any thoughts on that kind of more widely would be greatly appreciated and insightful. Thank you.
Dale, can I ask you to go first on that one?
Yeah, sure. Well, I know how that goes in government because I was there. Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what you're talking about in this forum. So I'll just give you an example of the police service right now. We've hired 10 social workers in the last little while from various different agencies. So we actually put a team approach to this because we both have different skill sets. And what's never worked, and still people are trying to do it, is moving money from one pot to the other. It's actually to approach this with a team set of skills is what you're talking about. So absolutely, it's essential. And I'd love to hear more about it, and perhaps we can take this offline. But for us and the work that we've put on this, both at the EPS and both from government, it's building an ecosystem for change. And it doesn't matter what problem you bring into it. It's the same formula. It's a financial formula. In the middle, you have data. On the right, you have a what works center or center of excellence or whatever you call it, co-design, co-measurement, co-evaluation between public, private, and philanthropy. In that is the accelerator, what we're talking about here, but also at a bit of an evaluation process that's absolutely critical as well. At the top is deal flow, which is no different than going to the bank with a financial deal. Somebody's got to actually take that deal, provide some independence, and for government, the ability to take some risk, kind of insulate them from some of the obviously fails that might happen. And on the outside, you need a separate bank that you can actually go. And some of that bank could be offered in, you've heard all these terminologies: pay for success, microloans, tax write-offs, tax incentives, much as the chief has talked about. And underneath all that is your service providers. And they come basically in three forms. You got public sector, a lot of your government folks fall in there. You got your academics, and you got your not-for-profits, and of course your for-profits. Take your wicked problem, go to the data, go to what work center, co-design, co-measure, evaluation. Somebody to sell the deal. All of those partners in the bottom will do mergers and amalgamations because they'll need the capacity to do the work. Go to the bank, sell the deal, and make government your second customer. Now that's really fast, and I'm sure that probably didn't, but it's to create the ecosystem for things like you're actually doing to make it successful, and you got to do it outside of government, which is what this is. Arm's length. Attached, but arm's length.
Luke, does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. There definitely needs to be a unique organization that's not for profit, that is in government, but also not necessarily a service provider themselves, I think, to be specialized in what this sector needs, for sure.
Excellent, thank you. Atif, I see you had a question, and welcome from Toronto, right?
Yeah, Edmonton's still in my heart, though. Don't worry. But yeah, no, it's definitely really happy to be here. So right now, I head up one of Canada's largest private foundations, looking at social impact investing as well as granting. One of the big challenges that we're observing, and I'm loving this conversation with the questions that I'm hearing, which is basically how we change the business model around social good. It's not even about the solution. It's not about the technology. It's about the business model around social good. But here's one of the challenges. When we look at, and it comes off the last question about service providers, I kind of want to flip that on its head. And maybe service providers are the best placed to be the innovators, but their business model doesn't necessarily allow them to do so. Because in many cases, service providers are the groups who are closest to the end customer, yet they have a business model and revenue lines that are defined by, and I'll wear my hat as the funder, I can tell them what they need to fund. You should fund impact areas and X, Y, Z, but they have to go out and implement. Through that implementation, they can learn a ton. But because that business model doesn't allow them to invest in operations admin, it doesn't allow them to invest in continuous learning. They have so many issues when it comes to talent attrition based off of this business model that they're put in. It kind of really hinders the ability to create scalable learnings and traction for social good. So I'm actually wondering, when we have this segment of the economy that works very closely with the end customer, how is it that we hope to change the business model that they operate in, that we value social good, and that traction that they have that is delivering impact can scale out?
Well, it's great comments, Atif, and I have some comments on that, but I'm going to ask Chet first because this is an area near and dear to her heart.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really great question. And I guess to state the obvious, like it's far easier from a business model perspective to take an already profitable company and evolve them to also be in business for social good. And so I think with that, though, there is an opportunity to make sure that from an ecosystem at large, we're bringing together nonprofit, for-profit, and government to create a system, if you will, to also fund companies that are purely just starting up to be in business for social good. And so I don't have all the answers by any means. My primary focus would be working with for-profit companies to become more socially, good and minded, which is an easier problem to solve. So curious to hear what you have to add to the conversation, Ashif.
Actually, I'm going to ask Dale first because he actually had this file in government. Dale, do you mind jumping in first?
So Atif, I was there when they were looking at social impact bonds at the federal level, and actually the Japanese government at the time were investing $500 million a year based on their dormant bank accounts, which was kind of cool. The point is social impact investing, social impact bonds are so narrow, they take the low-hanging fruit, which actually don't make the big difference. So that's exactly why this whole ecosystem that we're talking about has been designed. And if you go back into the money in the system, because you got to unpack this and you got to look at, because I like how you're thinking of it as a system thing. Most of the $7.5 billion spent in the city of Edmonton comes 60% from government. Most of it's the provincial government, but it has all three levels of government. 35% of it comes from philanthropy, business, and people that are investing what they think in social good, but they're actually just feeding the government thing. And these people are actually the people that elect the government. Now, the point is if you have an ecosystem of investing and you channel that towards outcomes investing, and you use that as a business model to make government second money, you actually flip that on its head and you do the innovation and the R&D for government. And that's exactly what this model does in the tech space. But there's also part of the bigger ecosystem of how this feeds the rest of them. That's the Cadbury secret, and it's very much doable. I've spoke on this in OECD in Paris. I've been to World Health Organization. There's going to be somebody that uncracks this nut. Our hope is that this project here starts to unpack that and gets to that, because you're exactly focused on the right point. And the reason I came back to policing, just to be honest with everybody, is I'm the only autonomous voice. I'm not elected. I actually can use my power of influence, or my voice of influence, as I like to record it, to get underneath some of the not-for-profits that are actually getting things done, provide them training, give them some of my money to do it, and put them in a police car or put them in a building together, and let's do it. Because we got to get out of the calls. But if we don't have somebody to take them, they're going to get worse.
That's great. Thank you, Dale. And I'll just add one last thing to that, Atif. Great question and great discussion on that. I envision these ventures that are coming to solve these exact problems to be working hand in hand with the direct service providers, the community agencies, the Bissells, the Boyles of our world, right? And working with them, because together the agency knows the exact problem. They know, because they face it day in and day out. They may not have the solution yet, right? But these ventures will come in from a very different mindset, using data, et cetera, AI, and so forth, and bring that solution together and collectively deliver that. Okay. And I also, I wouldn't be surprised for them to form partnerships with the agencies to say, you help us with this, you'll be our first customer, you'll get return of some sorts, whether it's an equity or whatever they want to do, right? Revenue sharing, whatever. They're free to make those deals on their own. And that's how the agency can be self-sustaining and deliver better outcomes. So I think there's a lot of potential here. So I'm really excited. We're going to encourage, that's part of our course. We're going to help them through all that stuff, encourage them to be B Corps, things like that. So lots of amazing things. There was a comment by Joseph on the question around the average citizen, John's question. There is an Amy, Alberta Machine Institute. Amy has a foundation course, a learning foundations course. So, that would be something that if you're an entrepreneur, a business person, or just anybody that wants to learn more, it's a great course to have. Maybe, Joseph, if you don't mind putting in the link, the URL, that would be great on the chat. I see there's a question from... Oh, that's just a comment. Chris had a question on the liquor store problem. That specific challenge has closed. The solution was picked, but there's always building a better mousetrap, right? So if you think you can come up with a better solution, there's always a market for it. So I'd never discourage you from innovating more. I mean, go ahead and do it. It might be better, and if it is better, it'll get the market traction. If you think the Accelerator is a great place to help you, please apply. Our applications, by the way, on that close middle of November. So you got a little bit of time, but I'd encourage anybody that's interested to apply. Any other questions? We've got one last minute. Okay. Well, with that, I want to thank everyone. I want to specifically thank Chet and Dale for joining me today. I hope you all enjoyed the session, and it is recorded. So I'm sure Startup Edmonton will make it available for everyone. Thank you, everyone. Be well and enjoy the rest of Startup Week.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everyone. That was really awesome.
Anytime.